Cloud adoption is ramping up, but prevention-based security isn't enough for the hybrid attack surface. That's why Gartner predicts that 60% of enterprise security budgets will go towards detection and response in 2020. ExtraHop Reveal X Cloud delivers cloud-native network detection and response for the hybrid enterprise, the only SaaS-based NDR solution for AWS. Request a 30-day free trial of Reveal X Cloud at extrahop.com/trial. That's extrahop.com/trial. Keep your company and products relevant, competitive, and reliable by standardizing your security framework to protect intellectual property, become a reliable business partner, and guard financial and customer information. Standards Connect is an online standards management solution from ANSI. It's Standards Access Simplified. Standards Connect is a cost-saving, fully customizable solution for entrepreneurs and companies that spend $2,000 or more per year on standards and want to translate spend into a subscription model, want to simplify access, search, monitoring, and collaboration, or need a centralized hub of standards for multiple users at one or more locations. Get a free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI. That's /ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian. We have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you will receive 1 CPE credit per webcast. Register for one of our upcoming webcasts with ServiceNow, Great Horn, or Core Security, for all of them, by going to securityweekly.com. Click the webcast drop-down and select registration. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can also get a CPE credit there, but you can find them in our on-demand library by selecting On Demand from the webcast drop-down. We also have exciting news about our programming starting Q4. Security Weekly is starting a new podcast called Security and Compliance Weekly, which will focus on the integration of security and compliance. Jeff Mann will host this new show. We have 3 episodes in the tank and getting ready to release them hopefully this week. So take a look for those coming up soon. All right, let's get into some leadership and communications articles for this week.
Yes, let's do it.
Let's do it. The first one, this was an interesting, Gartner had their IT symposium last week. Mm-hmm. And so there's a few Gartner articles that came out, which I thought were interesting. We're going to hit on a couple of them. This first one actually talks about the 4 different types of managers and which ones actually drive the most employee performance impact. And so what they basically say in the article is, look, there's 4 types of managers. You have teachers, cheerleaders, always on, or connectors.
I love those descriptions, by the way, because it really doesn't require much explanation beyond those terms.
Exactly right, which I thought was a really simple way to talk about managers. And so teachers and cheerleaders both are kind of motivational, have a 7 to 9% employee performance impact.
Now, my theory is that people would think those would be higher, right? If you can teach the people who are on your team, if you can be a cheerleader, so does that mean that's a great way to put it, right, for people on your team? I think the percentages are low there because as your team grows, you can't be a teacher and cheerleader for everyone.
Right.
I think that was really just looking at this quick. That was jumped out at me. I'm like, oh yeah, I only have as one person managing a team of 10 or 1,000, right? There's only so much time in the day that I can spend teaching and transferring my own knowledge, right? And I'm sure that does happen, which is why you see the 7 to 9%, but it's a resource constraint.
Right, which is why connectors, the 4th one on the list, actually has the highest. Because again, if you're connecting people to the right people and you
don't need to have, Matt froze there for a moment, but you don't need to have the answer. You just need to know how to direct your people to find the answer, or to be, how to be more efficient, or how to get access to a resource or implement that resource. You don't have to have all the answers, just how to get there. So Matt, I was just saying, as a connector, right, you're not taking on that work yourself, but you're advising your team, which can happen in the fraction amount of time as I can teach one of the team members something. I can say, to get your answer, you want to go either ask that person, or here's the right resource for you. Here's the right training site, right, for you to go take some modules and then come back and report back. And if you need more help, right, I've learned over the years from having good managers and bad managers that they're there to help you advance, right? In any way they can. And most, I think, efficiently, that's connecting you to some other resource to help you not be stuck, right? So that's the conversation. Anytime we meet with the staff here, I'm like, what can I do to help you get you unstuck and pushing forward, right? And oftentimes that's not, Matt's gonna sit down with you for an hour, right? It's another resource somewhere that you're gonna go to.
Yeah, and that's why connectors, I think, are so much more efficient, is because they're going to help find the resources so they don't have to be the teacher for everybody either.
Right.
Because, again, back to scale, they can only go so far. So this gives you the opportunity to point you in the right direction, get you unstuck, make you more efficient, and improve your overall performance. And you can do that at a larger scale as the teams get bigger. So that's why I think connectors are so much more effective.
Like when we put this in the context of defining requirements for a business process or software, it allows you to focus on those things where the answer really isn't anywhere else. The answer is myself, Matt, and the team sitting down going, okay, how do we want to do this? What data are we collecting in the process? What steps are in the process? How do we create software, acquire software to make this process better? You're spending more time on that business development than, okay, how do we not get caught with a phishing attack? Or what's the, how do I code this in this framework, right? That's the stuff you can go connect them with to learn, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
That's a good article.
It was a good article.
And I like the always on, right? Micromanagement, we know it doesn't work at all. It has the negative reverse effect.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's why you see them actually detracting from overall performance because of that micromanage type of skill set.
Absolutely.
It doesn't make you more efficient. It doesn't help your performance. It only makes it worse because you're constantly needing to answer back to that micromanager.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a good article. This next article is on CIO leadership. It's a pretty long article, but it really talks about how to get out of your management role, start to be a thought leader, not only to the organization, but also to the community and some other things. And again, we see a lot of this, right? From our sponsors, for example, we see a lot of people wanting to drive thought leadership in their industry. Yeah. And this article was a way to give some practical guidance from other leaders on approaches they've taken to actually build up some of that thought leadership, not only for, like I said, for their organization, but also for the community.
Yep. That's important.
Yeah, very important as part of this. The next article is something that you and I have done. This article gets interesting. It talks about secrets of success, how divide and conquer strategy generates efficiency to systems and boosts productivity. And the reason we talk about this a lot is you and I this is kind of what you and I did a year ago, right? When I came over, we kind of divided to conquer the two different pieces. Me more on the front office side, you more on the back office side, right? And it gives us the ability to support each other back and forth. But there's scenarios where divide and conquer doesn't work in organizations. And so this article starts out talking about some of the basics around divide and conquer and some of the challenges of how this strategy could actually fail, and then focuses the discussion more on types of strategies that when you use divide and conquer, it really helps you. And one was learning, which I thought was an interesting way to think about it, is how dividing learning based on breadth versus depth can actually help you with your learning side. And this is one thing I struggle with, is because I think about all the different resources you and I cover on a weekly basis, right? And the books I want to read, and how do you do it all, right? I think sometimes it's too much to consume. Here it's talking about breaking this stuff down based on breadth and then spending the time and tackling pieces of it where you can organize a little better. So there's some tips in here for me so I can get back to my book reading that I've neglected over the past.
Some of it's patience too, and just having an order. What order do the smaller parts come in, right, is really important. And sometimes you gotta, go back to learning the one foundational piece before you move on. It's like similar to when you first brought me the concept of containers. I'm like, what are you talking about? Right? So I got to go back and start with step one, understand how, and then you build on that. When we talk about DevOps and CI/CD pipelines, right? Then you build on that and start to get all the other pieces in line. That is a subject matter that you truly do have, I believe, have to go back to the fundamental building blocks of it, break it down into smaller pieces, right? But the order matters, so you may have to go back to something that is almost not related, but it builds that foundation, right?
Yep. The second one in here talks about searching. And the example I like in here is they get into debugging, right? So we talk about this is near and dear to your heart over the past few months. And it says, take the code into two sections, see where the problem lies. If it lies in the first half of the code, you discard the other half and then divide the first half again, and you keep doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to take your code sections and start to break them down will help you debug a problem to search for that problem faster. Very good use of divide and conquer technique, which I thought was interesting.
A lot of software development is not just understanding the different methodologies, but practicing them, right? It's similar to martial arts. We make the relationship to martial arts all the time, but that it's a learned skill. You can think, well, I want to divide those tasks and keep dividing them, but until you've done it a few times, it takes practice to really perfect, to know how to do that in different environments, right? Different languages.
Yeah, exactly. So a couple good use cases for using the divide and conquer strategy. Next is we talk a lot about communication also, and this one is how to look and sound confident during a presentation. We always have to work on our skills. Some really good tips here, and a lot of things I use when I do presentations, things I really try to focus on for the webcast as well. And the first one is how to look confident. You got to make eye contact. I have my camera structured this way, so I'm trying to make eye contact all the time, except for when I glance down at my notes.
Mm-hmm.
Keep an open posture, right? You don't want to be crossed-armed or closed up. You want to stay open and use gestures, which I have to be careful of not to knock something off of the shelf in front of me as I use my hand gestures.
Yeah, and I think, also in the how to sound confident, I think a lot of that is, and not just doing this once, but constantly doing this, is looking and listening to yourself and looking at yourself doing the presentation. I think is hugely important to understand areas that you may have gotten lazy about over time, right? Because many of this audience, we may say, well, I've given presentations, I've done training in the past, but this is a skill you have to constantly practice, right? And constantly go back and review to make sure that you're constantly improving and not slipping in certain areas.
Yeah, when you get into the sound confident side, practice makes perfect. I can't emphasize it enough. When I was doing the keynotes overseas in Singapore and Abu Dhabi, no less than 8 recordings. It's really easy to do, because I would just set down the iPhone in front of me and I would record my presentation, and then I would listen to it and I would make adjustments. Oh yeah, that didn't sound right, or I missed this. Okay. And by doing that over and over and over again, what you're doing is that muscle memory training to your brain. So when you go up on stage and you deliver it, it just flows.
Yeah.
Which is what you want, because you don't want the ums and the ahs and the filler words. You want to make those pauses when you're trying to get a point across and you want it to sink in for a second. You're changing the pace of your presentation at different times to keep the audience engaged. But to do that, you have to practice. And I always did it in front of a mirror in the hotel room and recorded every single one. And then listened to it, critiqued it, fixed it, and did it again until I felt confident that I had it nailed.
Yeah, I got my scores back from Hacker Halted, and I was pretty happy with them. And largely that's because, like Matt said, I had given the presentation a few times beforehand. And those other times I'd always gone back, changed slides, changed notes, and kind of restructured everything. So it's important to give it multiple times.
Yeah, definitely. Also, because of Gartner, starting to see a lot of stuff around 2020 spending priorities, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to pull in this 2020 IT spending priorities because there's a couple interesting things in here. In 2020, on-premise software accounts for 22% of technology budgets, while 25% are dedicated to SaaS, IaaS, and PaaS. So what you're seeing is technology start to cross over where budgets are moving more to different types of cloud deployments than on-premise deployments, right? So we're seeing that crossover, which is something we talk a lot about on the show. We're seeing that through the different things that we see in the industry every single day. But it went on to continue. It said, however, more than half of companies plan to decrease on-premise software spend, while 80% expect to boost SaaS and public cloud investments. So even though the percentage of budgets, which you're going to start to see is that continuation of those numbers going the opposite way. You're going to see declines in on-prem. You're going to see increase in SaaS spending. Things we've talked about before. But the coming investment arises from companies in the top 3 technology initiatives: digital transformation, cybersecurity, and cloud adoption, which are all really tied together in some form or fashion. But those are the top 3 where you're going to see increases continue because the business is trying to move through that digital transformation. Cybersecurity is playing a part of that, and the cloud is playing a big part of those digital transformation projects.
Yep. I mean, that's no surprises there. Put it that way.
Yeah, none whatsoever. And then my last article for the week is Gartner surveyed 144 senior executives across industries and found that digitalization misconceptions tops the list of concerns, while lagging digitalization ranks second. And they're also worried about the pace of change because it continues to rank high over and over and over again. And this is around this concept of digital transformation projects, right? They fear that they're lagging behind, that they can't change fast enough. So Gartner gets in and talks about a couple techniques to think about during these changes. It was kind of interesting. The first one was think like a startup. And that is break the problem down into smaller teams and develop minimal viable products or projects, kind of concepts around digital transformation. One of the fears is that these large organizations who have these big teams that are working on digital transformation, they're too big. They're getting stuck. So they say, break it down, think like a startup, break it down to small teams, build minimal viable products, and use that as a way to accelerate the pace of change issues that larger organizations are facing.
Well, I think it's similar to the exercises we go through here, right? And many organizations go through. And I think one of the keys to success is to just like take everything off the table, right? There's no bad ideas. What if we were to start over and rethink? Because I think you can get stuck, right? And we've been at those certain points where we're like, oh yeah, that's the answer, and like make a note. Oh yeah, that's probably the better answer, right? But it's important to take a step back, take those notes, and go, all right, let's just take everything off the table. How would we approach this problem from the start? Then what you end up with is a set, hopefully, of really good ideas that you whittle down to. Then you do what the article says, Matt, right? Then you take those smaller chunks and go, hey, if there was a team working on this, it would fit in with what we were doing. We'd be able to advance to this next goal, right? And that's really hard at scale, right? We're a much smaller organization, but I think it's the right strategy to say, hey, I'm going to go have a team do this research, start integrating that into the product, integrating that into whatever we're delivering to our customer, and then building upon that to ultimately achieve your goal of transforming whatever you're trying to transform.
Yeah, and you do it in minimal ways. You don't have to reinvent the whole process or the whole piece of software. You make incremental improvements. You build something, you prototype it, it works, you release it, and then you iterate on it, and you keep doing that over and over. That allows you to move forward without these projects failing.
And you hope that you're moving forward and not having to go back and rewrite. Like when Matt and I talk about how we are going to make our software better and move it forward, I'm always mindful of Okay, but what's the requirement going to be after that, right? And what's the requirement going to be after that, so that when we implement it, whether it's me or someone else, we know to implement it in a way that we know what's going to be building on it. And sometimes I'm like, we got to take a time out. Yes, I can make this work and it's a shortcut, but if that's where we're going, I need to spend more time now. Otherwise, it's double the effort moving forward. I mean, I think that's just project management and software design 101.
Yeah.
That we lose sight of because we have all this great technology in front of us, right?
Exactly. The second thing this article points out is that everyone must have permission to disrupt, especially executives. And where the other big failure in these projects happen is you don't have that kind of buy-in across the executive team and who's going to run these projects and not. Without getting all the executives on board and making sure everybody's in a position to succeed, that's the other big challenge with a lot of these digital transformation projects and why they fail. They don't have that permission to disrupt across all the organization.
Cool.
Yeah. That's all I had for this week. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.